On the show I've got Becca.
Yeah.
Becca is a coach specialising in self-love. Is that correct?
Self-love,
Yep.
and connection. So everything to do with the self,
Right.
essentially, which, is what we're all coming back to at the end of the day.
Yep. And so what got you into that?
My own journey, I think,
Yep.
like so many of us, I had a few different points that were quite pivotal, I suppose, in the last 6 or 7 years,
Yep.
and engaged my own coach when I
Right.
sort of felt like I needed some support to, get myself out of a place of stuckness and, flowing into more alignment and, just feeling more content in my life. And, there was something that aligned with me so beautifully, something that I felt like I was almost doing anyway, in a way, when bringing into my work, bringing into my friendships. And so I really wanted to explore the idea of what it would look like to kind of create a career out of doing something that felt so authentic and quite natural to me. So
I think that must be a common theme with a lot of people that get into these kind of fields, whether that's counselling, psychologists, coaches and things, where you generally need something yourself at some point. And then when you find that help, you feel like you've learned a lot and you're able to provide it, but it's also one of those things that you're like, this is me, like this comes so naturally to me anyway. I want to be able to do this for others, And especially I think for people like us who learn these significant lessons, we're like, oh my God, has anyone else learnt this? Like I need to show people what this is all about. Like,
absolutely. For sure, definitely. I think that's one of my core centers around, I'm not sure if you've explored human design at all.
Remind me of the definition.
It's kind of more, human design is sort of like spirituality and science, mixing in the middle.
Yep.
And one of the core pieces that comes through in my human design is that, learning by experience and then teaching others.
Right, yes.
Which I think you're right, it kind of probably is a real beautiful part of why a lot of people move into this work.
Absolutely.
And the purposeful nature of it as well. Being able to have a career that feels is really authentic to you, just show up being your authentic self, but you're able to support people.
That's right. Well, I mean, if you think about someone who goes to university to study a particular topic because they're interested in it, and then they come out of it and they're doing it, that's all very well and good, but there's a very, very clear difference between someone who has lived some serious stuff in that field, in that area, whatever that is. 100%. And I guess it's hard to maybe put into the same. Certain jobs or certain roles in society would be more, you could compare them better. So in our field, most people have had to go through some serious stuff to provide that value. If you were raised in a family where dad was a police officer, granddad was a police officer, all that kind of things, you'd be probably a really good police officer because, you've been surrounded with it your whole life. But then, in these jobs, I think the best coaches and the best people who teach, like you say, are the people who have lived it. I mean, I remember seeing a thing, actually, it was like a meme years and years ago when they were comparing the Canadian government and another government or something in the world, but I wish I could quote it word for word, but they effectively said that like everyone in this particular country who was in Parliament had qualifications in the area that they were representing. So like the Minister of Agriculture used to be a farmer.
Yeah.
And the Minister of Police used to be a police officer.
Absolutely.
And it made me think, I'm like, why are our politicians not that?
Businessmen.
Like they're all just that. Like we need people who know the role. They've had their boots on the ground effectively. They have been doing it to then administer it and all that kind of stuff. And it's the same with coaching, same with psychologists, everything. You would hope that the person that is teaching you has done it.
And not only that, but is still got some skin in the game, still actually realizing that they're on their own journey, whether that is a farmer, as the Minister of Agriculture, or within our space. Like I never pretend to have my shit together. I do not, for a moment think that I've got all the answers. I'm very much on this journey of consciously loving myself the way that I deserve to, but I have made that conscious decision. So that's still a work on every day. I'm not there every day, every moment, but it's something that I hold a really beautiful awareness around, and a decision every day that I wake up and actually think, no matter what I'm moving through, I get to choose this for myself.
And that in itself is a relatable quality. You know what I mean? Because like the other other people are also going through these things. They need, a lot of them need to admit that they're not perfect, that they're still going through these things. And if you can model that and you're like, it's okay, we're in this together. I'm just that much further ahead maybe.
100%. Yeah. And that's a massive catalyst for me, and I'm sure somewhere along your journey as well, is that I suppose that conclusion that we're not perfect, that we don't have to have our shit together.
Yep, that's
I spent so much of my life pretending I had my shit together and not wanting to put a foot out of line, so to speak, in terms of, like what was cool, what was expected of me.
Yep.
And then the closer I've come, the more work I've done in this on my journey. It's just been so, it's like the breath of fresh air to actually be like, it's so much deeper, and you feel more connected to not only yourself but your people and your world when you can just admit that you are just an imperfect human floundering around doing the best you can.
Absolutely.
Choosing the best that you can for yourself.
It was I think the biggest revelation I've ever had in my life was that taking ownership of my flaws and mistakes and bad decisions was so powerful.
Absolutely.
So powerful,
That responsibility piece is huge. And I think that's where, as a massive thing, I suppose I support clients though, and a massive piece of my own journey is actually being able to take responsibility for those things and knowing that, you've played a part in what you're moving through in life, and being able to actually look at that, create some awareness and just, I don't know, give yourself grace around it as well.
Isn't that funny? Because that's probably one of the big keys to self-love and self-worth and everything, is to genuinely forgive yourself for being imperfect. Because I think a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves to be this. And that's what would have a huge impact on self-worth, whether that's this in relationships or it's this at work or it's this at home. Like, that being able to admit that and go, I'm working on this, it's a work in progress, is probably that first step.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. That kind of embracing and accepting all parts of ourselves, and going back to that point before around sort of hiding all of those not nice to look at parts of myself in particular. I feel like it's so exhausting hiding those parts of you that you've been told aren't good enough, or that aren't worthy of being seen. And I'm talking emotions like jealousy, anger for women, emotions like, a lot of people, and maybe men as well, get told that they're too emotional, or and there's a safe way to express all of those. I'm not saying that, like raging around is always supportive for yourself and the environment that you want to choose to be living in. But I think allowing yourself to be full spectrum of you, and really looking at those not nice to look at parts, that's massive. Because if you can't just love yourself on the good days, and you can't just love the beautiful, your strengths and the attributes that you hold as a human, we get the opportunity to learn to love and to at least accept some of those not nice to look at parts. And I'm sure you have moved through a journey of accepting some of those yourself. Yeah,
unbelievable. Like, the biggest thing I think that I have learned in that area, and I've been highlighting it in even a few posts that I put up over the last couple of weeks, was that we should never ever be hard on ourselves or anyone else for the emotions we feel. But we should be very critical of our behaviour and how we respond to them.
Yeah, love that.
That's the difference. And you can completely separate those two things.
Yep, absolutely.
You can be like, the emotion is fine, whatever it is. You can feel it, because we all operate on a spectrum. What might make one person jealous may not make another. And so you'd look at them and you go, why is this person even jealous in this situation? I cannot relate to that. That is unhealthy, But you're like, actually, they have had a completely different upbringing. They've had a different set of circumstances. They might have significant trauma. They might be feeling terrible about themselves for a number of reasons, and so they look at everyone else as having these things, or things that they want that they don't feel like they have. That person is completely entitled to feel that way, but they are not entitled to behave in a way that would disadvantage others or be antisocial or violent or anything like that. So they are entitled to be judged by society for their behaviour, but not for how they're feeling. Yeah. So if you want to exist in society, I think, and these are my opinions, obviously.
Yeah, I love that.
If you want to exist in society in a way that you're welcomed, I guess it's about establishing what the rules are in society, and there'll be a set of fundamental rules that operate within a healthy range. Yeah. This is a range where no one is really disadvantaging each other. This is a range where we can have open communication, that there's no games being played, that it's not an unsafe environment. And if your behaviour falls outside of that range, that's when society's going to police that effectively.
Yeah.
People are going to say to you, this is wrong, But I think a lot of people are operating outside of that unhealthy range, and it is a minefield out there.
For sure.
And then we've got to very carefully define what that healthy range actually looks like, and then reinforce to people that they can feel this, but there are better ways to deal with it if they aren't dealing with it in a constructive way.
Yeah. Coming back to that sort of personal responsibility,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Don't not feel this, but take responsibility for how you're feeling and support yourself in a way that's actually going to have a beneficial impact. Like if I think about anger or even emotion, like anger's always been something that I was taught wasn't a good thing to show.
Right.
And so therefore I feel like I've suppressed a lot of anger. In fact, it quite often comes up in different sessions I'm doing with coaches, or whether that, more spiritually aligned sessions, this holding on to anger. So now when I feel it arise in me, I look to release it in a positive way, whether that's like my husband says like, do you need to go and punch a pillow, or like stomping, screaming, and I talk to my clients through that process quite a lot, because I don't think we want to be afraid of those big emotions. They need to be felt, but there are also positive ways. And yes, of course, like I've got the awareness and the skill set and understanding to be able to put that anger into like a positive outlet, and I know that I'm probably in a privileged position to be able to do that. I know that's not always the way for everyone.
No.
But there is the opportunity to give yourself grace to feel the fullness of that in a way that you can then go back to cooking dinner, or come back to work in the afternoon and feel like, cool, okay, I can leave that at the door.
Yes, and then you have the privilege now to teach others what you've learnt.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yes, absolutely. And it's such beautiful work. I mean, as well as I do, it's it's hard to kind of articulate, but the feelings that come from when these things click for a client or in a group scenario is just really magical. Yeah,
absolutely. I had I kind of had a post the other day with a person who had said to me, what makes you qualified? I did these...
yes, I saw... Yes,
did you see
did see that. Yeah.
So someone said to me, what makes you qualified? And they said, not having a dig, but what makes you qualified to give this advice?
Yes,
And I did end up highlighting to them that I'd done some formal qualifications. I had that psych diploma and a life coaching diploma, but to me, they didn't really teach me how to talk to people.
100%.
And they didn't teach me... they didn't even teach me 1% of the understanding that I have of people based on my experiences. And I just said to them, look, I am putting myself out there to potentially help people with problems they have based on the solutions that I've found to similar problems. Yeah. You can take it or leave it. Yeah. But the advice is there. That lived experience has been just fundamental. The feeling that I get from having someone approach me and I hear them and I'm getting clarity on it and I'm listening for more and I'm like, I can see where this is going. And I'm like, I have been there. Yeah. I have been there before, but I also have to tell myself I am not this person.
Yes. Yeah.
And their partner is not my partner.
Yes.
And so I have to a degree go, right, I can see a way through this, but I think my way through it is about 40 to 60% of what might work.
100%.
And there's this element that I can't account for. So I effectively have to get the person to come to their own conclusion, but I have a rough idea of how to steer the conversation. And initially, if I get them to a place where they are like, I don't think so, I go, okay, I've gone down a street here that was probably not the way that I needed to go. But when I do get them there and when I start to go through that process and things, it is the most fulfilling experience because I'm just like, it's the same as teaching flying. I'm at that point where I have this amount to contribute where I feel valued. And that's come from going through it, I guess. Of course, which I love. Yeah. What's the number one thing you're facing in life or work right now? The number one challenge, and how are you tackling it?
So a big one for me is we are relocating this year to Ireland.
Cool.
So I say the UK, and then almost like, hubby would not be impressed with that. So my husband's Irish, and we have decided that we're going to go and spend some time with his family. We've both lost a parent ourselves, so we understand how important it is to spend quality time as our parents are getting a little bit older. And so, as you can imagine, there's some real practical challenges like booking flights and renting the house out and things like that. But For me, there's also emotional challenges, and I'm so excited. Like, it feels so right. It feels like a really beautiful opportunity. But then I also, on the other side, have this grieving process that I'm moving through with regards to, I love my life here, I love my lifestyle, I love my people. And actually, so that's an element of it. I feel like I could almost speak to like the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual elements of this challenge. And that, coming from a holistic standpoint, that's generally how I like to tackle challenges, is kind of look at all of those elements and how I need to support myself across the board there. So it's just big outlook. And it's exciting, but it's also like can be overwhelming, and I need to ensure that I stay grounded and this is where I am. This is my presence is being here in Christchurch at the moment and not, you're not there yet. But it's really, really exciting. I'm really thrilled.
Cool. Oh, that sounds like a big challenge. And I think relocating would have to be one of, especially overseas, would have to be one of the biggest challenges a lot of people face. Like, aside from loss and things like that, it's a huge, you're changing your whole living environment and you will not have the same people surrounding you and everything like that. So it's going to be a big change.
It's an interesting one. I'm not sure, if we come back to that place of like, experience teaches you so much. I've relocated a couple of times in my life, and so I wonder if having that to go on makes it less scary. I'm not a massively detail orientated person, so when something feels good, I'm like, well, this is it, let's go for it, let's do it, and try not to get too caught up in the how. But it's an exciting time.
Awesome. Very exciting. I can imagine. What would you say your top 3 best traits are?
Emotional intelligence. I do feel like I have a pretty good read on people, and a pretty good read on myself. Like, I think that first and foremost is actually a strength to be emotionally intelligent in myself, to have the awareness of myself, which I've cultivated through investment and time and experience. I have a really natural zest for life. I am a very enthusiastic person, which feels really good for me. And yes, it's not for everyone, but I do really think that's one of my
world needs people like that.
100%. I do feel like I naturally bring an energy, and that has at times not always served me, and I've fallen into some toxic positivity traps. But I feel like I've got a really beautiful handle on it, where I can let it shine when it needs to, and I can, don't feel like I have to bring it out. It's not like I don't have to be me and show up in it necessarily.
So what would be an example of one of those toxic positivity traps?
Oh my goodness gracious. I feel like almost to the point of like, I can think about scenarios where I will have been like, had a really shit day, or like something's happening. Oh my gosh, perfect example. My dad was really sick when I was younger at high school and through the first part of uni. And I can almost remember being like, it being real heavy energy at home. Like, obviously Dad's not in a good place. We're all sort of like, holy shit, what's happening? And then I can almost remember just like putting a mask on and just going into any interaction with friends, with partners at the time, school, any of those kinds of things, just feeling like that part of me and my grief and my emotion was not acceptable.
Okay. You're like, I can't show people this.
No.
So it was like a coping strategy to make sure that the world didn't know how you were really feeling.
Absolutely.
Right. Wow.
Because who would want me if I was this like, emotional wreck? Like, I'm only good enough when I'm this bright, bubbly personality.
I've got to be able to contribute to the situation in a positive way. Otherwise, people are going to reject me.
Absolutely. 100%.
Wow. Yeah. And how old were you when you started doing that, do you think?
Probably through like 16 to 19, 20.
So old enough to be very self-aware, quite self-aware at a point where you're just kind of like, this is what I have to do, Yeah,
well, I don't know. At the time, it felt subconscious. Like, I don't think I was like...
You weren't consciously thinking of it?
Specifically, but it felt very much like, I know I need to be like this, but I don't know if I realised that I was suppressing everything. And then obviously within that became this, like freedom or like free reign that I just go and get drunk, and that was the only time that I could really release all my emotions, and I'd be this like basket case.
It's all coming. It's been pinned up until that point, then it's released, and then afterwards you're like, oh my god, and that's the scales tipping back the other way.
Absolutely.
Wow.
For sure. So that was kind of how I lived for a long, long time. And definitely the suppressing everything and then like going out and just losing it.
Was there a moment of realization where you were like, there was a point where you've come to that conclusion that you were doing that? Do you remember when that was? Or do you remember being like, oh my God, I have to stop this. I have to actually start talking about it? Or
I feel like it was probably only recently, like when I sort of discovered this work. So we're talking 5 years ago.
Right.
Really, if truth be told, I think I still went into the working environments that I was in at the time, lots of my friendships and relationships with this kind of kind of glossy mask of like what I think I should be and the way that I've been, the expectations of me, the way that I've been taught I'm accepted and I'm good enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I it's crazy to think, isn't it, that like I've only just come to the conclusion about a lot of my negative cycles of behavior a year ago.
Yeah.
And I'm almost 40.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I would have thought that I'd have it figured out way before that.
No.
But it's like sometimes you have to live some significant time as a real adult to go. And I think having my son has been a big one for me. It's actually helped me understand myself as a parent.
Beautiful.
And then I've looked at how I was parented, and then I was looked at, what I'd like to do differently and what I'd like to do better. And then I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, a lot of it I'd forgotten. I got swept up in all that kind of stuff, but hadn't really looked at who I was to the people around me and things as well. So it was, everything's has kind of come together at this point. But again, I had to go through some significant failures, I guess I would call them, and then look into the patterns of behavior and things. So I don't know, there was this moment where it was a catalyst for me as well, but it's only happened in the last very recent history.
How amazing to have that awareness for it. And I hope that continues for me and for you, that we continue to hold ourselves to a standard of looking for awareness in everything that we're moving through, because there's so much to learn about ourselves. And there's life is made up of these like hectic failures and and that's why we really need to celebrate everything full spectrum.
I think so many people are actually afraid to face those moments. They try and prevent them so much that even when they do happen, they try and just bury them and move on on the same set of tracks that they're on. And those moments are so significant. They can transform your life and your outlook and everything if you're just open to experiencing them and embracing the failure. And as we said before, taking that accountability. Being like in the vulnerability to talk about it, to acknowledge it, to right your wrongs if you've made any, and then to go, what does my life look like now? Or what could it possibly look like? This is a point where I'm at ground zero and I can actually start to rebuild something new. Yeah. Do I want to rebuild the same thing I have been for the last X amount of years? Yeah. Or do I have the opportunity now to kind of like just open the book and go, everyone, this is me, and then and do it properly from there. Yeah. And I guess there'll be a lot of people who I think it would probably go through their whole lives denying those moments.
100%.
Because I was probably denying them right up until this point. You know, and then I finally opened it up. And then I feel like it's probably one of the biggest life hacks that you can come across.
We're all clutching these things so close to ourselves, and what we don't realize is the freedom that comes from being able to look at yourself and be like, oh shit, this is me. It's actually, it's a really beautiful thing, but it's, responsibility again, because it can be so easy to want to blame everyone else, and until we actually are able to stand, in our truth and take accountability. It's a hard place to live, like faking it, or, like covering up parts of yourself. And it's scary. I get it, because there is those fears of rejection and things that come through, and we've all been there.
But I guess I would argue that if you don't face it, you're not even capable of loving yourself. Yeah. If you're clinging to those things that you want to hide about yourself, you're never going to, because it's likely that the people around you don't even know the true you.
Absolutely.
And how are you going to get any possible external validation? Not that that's a healthy thing to really push for, but we do all need a certain extent, a small amount of external validation. But it's like, if you've got the right people around you, then you can get that by being yourself. You can just be yourself, and you should get externally validated, and it's nice and healthy because you are, you're happy because you are content. You're able to be yourself, and the people around you can see that, and it's positive. Whereas if you're hiding these elements of yourself, or you're doing these things that are not you, just to fit in, you'll never be able to love yourself because you don't even know what that person really looks like.
That's exactly it. You don't know yourself.
No.
And you miss out on so much because there's parts of the things that you're so busy hiding, or there's parts of the, especially awareness of the things that you're hiding away that will just bring you so much goodness in your life.
It's like unexplored roads.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And that's a massive piece with, I mean, that's like big part of our role as coaches or in the mental space is allowing people to find that awareness within themselves so that they can use it. Like, it's knowledge is power, and the most powerful knowledge is what we have of ourselves and how we move through life. Yeah,
absolutely. It's that central place that you can come back to that can guide you from there. It's like home, effectively. Like you can always go back to that spot and work out your direction from there. But if you don't know where that is, you don't know what it looks like, you are lost.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. But if we're constantly looking for external things to support our happiness, where does that leave us?
No. How do you incorporate self-love into your coaching philosophy, and what unique approach do you bring your clients?
Yeah, well, I think with life coaching in any I suppose aspect, there's this massive piece that is self, and whether it's self-love in the first instance, or whether it's, self-awareness, self-acceptance. The love piece comes from being able to look at yourself with a curious eye. I wouldn't say a critical eye, a curious eye, and a place of acceptance. And it's a really powerful feeling to take responsibility for your life and to not place that responsibility in anyone else's hands.
Yes.
We know how good it is to fall in love with someone else, and you're able to give yourself those same feelings and consciously decide, day in, day out, that you're worthy of that love. So I think it's probably, there's a few different elements that kind of come into the coaching philosophy, but largely around the awareness piece and the acceptance piece, and almost giving yourself permission to say that it's okay to want to feel that way about yourself.
Yeah.
We were really taught that, like, if you love yourself, it was like, you thought you were the shit. And that's where it kind of ended. But then why would we not want to feel that way about ourselves? And it's all this messaging that comes from, early on in our formative years. And I just think, like, the world is so, I feel like the message around falling in love and finding that person and, being in a committed, loving relationship, that messaging is like thick and fast and everywhere, in every movie and every love song. Yeah,
every song.
Every song.
Yeah.
And I just think it's like, why would you not give yourself that first and foremost? So I'm not really sure if I've answered the question there.
No,
but
you have.
I think.
Well, I mean, it sounds like that's, your coaching philosophy, obviously. And it is reinforcing that journey. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, our formative years, it's not reinforced that we even have to focus on that.
Yeah.
No one really talks about it with us as kids, unless you have parents that are very much like that, reinforcing that in a way of like, you can do anything you want to. You're amazing. You're this and that. But I guess when you're a child, you think, every parent talks like this. It's how I felt as a kid when my parents were like, you're really smart, you can do whatever you want to and things. I'm thinking, but that's what every mum says to their son. And I think you don't start thinking about relationships until by the time you start thinking about relationships, it's too late. You've almost skipped over that whole period of thinking about. You should be thinking about your self-love stuff. And again, New Zealand and Australia are really bad for that tall poppy thing. And kids even do it. They want to cut each other down if they feel that person, if they're talking about themselves too much or whatever. It might just come down to one kid's interpretation at school of what you're saying, and they're like, he's skiding about this. And you're like, actually, I wasn't skiding. I was just really proud of the fact that I did that. You get cut down at that point, and then you're like, well, I'm not talking about that again. And then you start to think, well, I can't talk about how I feel about myself. I can't actually be proud of my achievements. So maybe I've got to start looking for that elsewhere.
Yes. And that's what happens, isn't it? I mean, I can absolutely remember that, like, had good week at school if you get the certificate, or how do I prove myself, how do I seek that external validation, and teaching kids to have that internally is
I mean, you get called a goody good or whatever at school for achieving.
I know.
And you're like, so there'd be kids out there that'd be nervous to go and get awards because they don't want to be seen in front of everyone as standing out, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do feel like there was a path for me at high school where it was like, if you want to be cool and fit in, you're not like academically.
Got to get shit grades.
Yeah.
You're not a cool kid unless you don't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's just my...
It depends on the school though too. I guess like if you went to Christ College or something like that, it'd probably be a bit more like, you know, and if you're a prefect and things,
absolutely.
You are cool.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
But at Cashmere High, it wasn't the case.
No, yeah. I tested that where I went as well. No, definitely not. So yeah, it's a tricky one to kind of look inwards and I think that's why there is such a beautiful need for the opportunity to go there with yourself, because so many of us growing up in, you know, our specific generation, I suppose, didn't have the opportunity to kind of hone in on that. And then we've potentially focused on getting into these relationships. And, you know, I wonder how it would have impacted some of my earlier relationships. And maybe you could talk to this as well. If you had the awareness or if you had the respect and acceptance of yourself, whether or not it would have changed things.
Yeah, I think early relationships, you think about what age would it be that most people get into their first 13,
maybe
12,
I don't know.
13, 14?
Yeah,
you
maybe.
Said 13 to 15, and then you look at like most 13 or 15-year-olds' motivations for being in one. So you think, why do they want one?
Absolutely.
And you're like, well, they probably only want it for their own needs at this point. They're really just thinking about themselves and the fact that I'm attracted to this person. I want to spend time with them. I don't really know how to do it, but I'm going to test the water and send them a text or, you know, whatever. And then you get into this relationship where you're like, oh, this is new. Here's these hormones and emotions and things I haven't felt before. But that's your time to navigate it. It's like, imagine a child who had practiced heavily in building their own self-love before that moment. They would probably approach the relationship from a very balanced place where they were able to handle rejection, where they were able to give as much as they were taking, where they were a bit more in touch with what they were receiving versus what they were able to contribute to the relationship as well. And I think that if it's probably not common that any 13 to 15-year-old goes into that situation with that mindset.
No.
But it really, even if the parents were able to do a lot of work with that child beforehand, it's still going to be that time of testing and adjusting and working out what these new feelings are and everything.
Absolutely.
But that's why it's so important that the kids have that guidance throughout that whole process, that they are being reminded to love themselves through the process. I mean, I'm a big believer in that men are expected to approach women to a degree in the dating game in Western society, at least. It's one of those things. And even if they're not expected to, men generally do, whether the woman wants it or not. And so this is why you get cat calls and all this you know, just endless DMs and women's DMs and things. And so men have to handle rejection from an early age. And a lot of men aren't taught how to handle rejection. And I think if they had that high self-love and that high self-worth, they would cope a lot better with it. But this is when these really negative emotions surface, and this is when they start taking it out on the woman that's rejected them, or they start to become really anti-woman, or they start to see them as an evil thing because they're contributing to this negative emotion that they feel. And that you're so right, and that sorry, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent,
but
I'm
so here for it. I'm like,
that those early years where the child has progressed into preteen, so like 9 to 12, 9 to 13, it's so important that in those years, and this is why I have these conversations with my son, is that we are reinforcing positive belief systems that are going to serve not just them well moving forward, but it's going to mean that they're not going to contribute to the harm done to their potential partners that are then going to ongoing, you know, it's just a cycle that just starts to perpetuate itself from there. I honestly believe my cycle started when I was about 14, 15 in my first relationships. The fact that I was my first girlfriend effectively cheated on me with one of my friends. My second girlfriend effectively left me for her best friend, and then my third girlfriend, by that stage I was just like, I have no faith that I'm going to be treated well, that I'm not going to be effectively left. So I just had one foot in, one foot out. But that was my philosophy for the next, until I was like 35.
Based on your beliefs that you accumulated over those experiences, what was that core belief that you were?
Well, the core belief, I think, if I look into it, was that I needed to make sure I always had options.
Right.
And it was because the first two girlfriends I had, I invested everything into them.
Right.
I was not interested in anyone else.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be in any relationship, but I was just like, I'm not going to make that mistake again, because I'm just going to get left and I'm going to feel like I have no one. And at 15, 16, that's the best I could do. You know what I mean? Like, with my emotions, I was like, I don't want to feel like I'm alone again.
Absolutely, 100%.
I don't want to feel like I'm the lesser person.
Yep.
I'm not good enough because I'm being left for someone else. So I will make sure that if I'm in a relationship, I still have people there just in case.
Yeah.
And there was, in multiple relationships, took that too far. Made sure that I maintained these connections to the point where I was emotionally or physically cheating. And so that in itself was, and it became this, as an adult, it became this like more about my ego and what I could achieve effectively. Suddenly I was like, I'm this guy I have these options, and I was able to manage it somewhat. But then I put myself in situations where I was so incredibly stressed trying to manage it, and I had completely overlooked all of the self-love, self-worth, self-stuff that it had just disappeared into the background as nothing. Yeah. And I thought, and I adapted heavily to my partners. I tried to make sure they were okay on the surface, but deep down I was just cooked. Yeah. I was broken. Yeah. I hadn't looked at that stuff.
For sure.
And my self-worth was really tied up in what they thought. Yeah. Even though I didn't want to let them have it. Yeah. They had it.
Yes, absolutely, from a subconscious level. Yes. And what was your belief around what having a relationship meant for you as a person? Like, you sort of said, I didn't want to not have anyone, even when you were kind of one foot in the door, what did having a relationship or having someone there mean about you as a person?
I think it probably, if I'm honest, just evolved from this intimacy as a teenage boy.
Yeah, okay.
Just the company of a female, really. Okay. So then I tried to make sure that I was just picking people I was attracted to. Okay. I didn't really think about whether we had common interests. I didn't really think about whether we came from similar families, anything. The first serious relationship I had was 3 years, and she was from a private school, I was from a public school, and I just saw the differences straight away. I was like, okay, this is very different. Families, upbringing, everything, and didn't feel like I belonged. And again, it was another reason to keep a foot out. Right. I'm like, I don't get all the stuff she's talking about, and she's talking about St. Thomas's boys and all this kind of thing, and I'm just like, who are they? What are they? Why are they any different? And I'd left school at this point. Yeah. And they were all still at school, so it was the relationship to me was about the company of a female I was attracted to. It was that simple.
So there was no belief underlining, even though if we look further down the line, there was the subconscious of like wanting them to accept you, wanting them to like caring about what they thought of you.
Yeah, when I say thought of me, I think all I really cared about at that time was that they weren't, and I didn't actively think like this, but looking back, it's probably what my priorities were. Yeah. Was that I didn't want to lose access to intimacy. Okay. With someone I thought was attractive. Yep. Who was there for just me. Yep. And that was pretty much it. And it was, as I got older, I started to think about the things I valued as I lost them. So when that first relationship ended, I tried so hard to get it back, even though I'd done so much damage to lose it in the first place. And it was because it really impacted my self-worth losing it. It put me into this extreme version of what I had gone through when I was 13, 14, 15. It was just like, suddenly now I'm going through it as a 21-year-old. I'm like, whoa, this is so much worse. And it didn't help that the guy she picked was 6'9", and like
of course.
It's a dangerous
Once again,
guy.
these stories we tell ourselves around. But
I know.
I get it.
At the time, I was so emasculated.
Of course,
I was like, oh my god,
100%.
it's terrible. And she strung me along for a long time. So the feelings I was going through again was it was like my worst fear from my 13, 14-year-old days that I developed had then come to fruition.
Yeah.
And I tried for so long to get her back. And then when I finally had the opportunity, I said no. And that was a lesson in itself. I was like, actually, that was probably one of the first significant lessons I remember learning about self-love to a degree, because it was like my brain was trying to get me to repeat that cycle, but my body was saying, this is not good for you.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I don't like it at the time. It's really challenging, but it's a really beautiful reminder.
It was, this is not good for you. And I took the harder option, which was to say no. I had her, she was sitting in my car crying in the uni car park, and she's like, can we give this a go? And I said, no, it's all I'd wanted for like a year and a half. Yeah. All I'd wanted at least. Yeah. And so, then I went into another relationship, but I still had that thing missing. And again, throughout that relationship, learned a lot. It became very comfortable. And again, it was just, she was the one person, it's my son's mother, she was the one person who let me be myself.
Beautiful.
I didn't know how much I valued that till I didn't have it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And it set a standard for me after that, after I got out, because I went into another toxic relationship after that, chose someone based on physical attraction. And then when I came out of that, I was like, oh my God, how good was that? She just let me be myself, like reflecting on that
100%,
relationship.
100%. Yeah.
And it would, again, big significant lesson. Hey, that's healthy. That's probably what I need. And also, it made me reflect on how I treated her as well, and I guess how I treated everyone at that point. Still broken. Went into my next relationship, and again, same patterns. But the big thing was that I had that 1 foot in, 1 foot out thing, and all the way through. Yeah, all the way through, and it was never satisfied, never content. And I think one of the big things was that I didn't, because I was only thinking about whether I'm attracted to this person and whether I had this access to intimacy. That dominated everything. Yeah. It meant that I just overlooked all the things I should be looking at. Yeah, yeah. And so now my philosophy, and again, I don't know if I'm off on a tangent again, but my philosophy with dating now is to build friendships. Yeah. Because friendships are the solid foundation that will keep you guys together. Yeah. I believe. Yeah. Intimacy will not keep you together. Yeah. Intimacy is a band-aid in a lot of relationships. Absolutely. And if you prioritize it, like most people do, they swipe right on Tinder because they are attracted to the person and that's it. Sure, it's a good way to start a conversation. You're like, cool, I'm going to be attracted to this person. I know that. I've got that out of the way. It looks like anyway. And then you can get to know their personality. Of course, when you meet someone as a friend, you're going to work out pretty quickly whether you're attracted to them or not. Yeah, of course. But I think it's best to kind of just not suppress those feelings, but put them to the side for a moment and try and get to know the person as a friend. Because if you can get to know them as a friend, chemistry will develop if it's going to anyway. Absolutely. It just will. For sure. So just relax about the intimacy. Totally, let it happen or not. But be open to having friends. If you aren't open to having friends of the opposite sex, you will never, in my opinion, you will never have a relationship that isn't codependent. Or, and the reason I say that is because if you just hone in on one person and you're like, okay, I'm attracted to this person and then I'll work out if I like them, you're really heavily investing in the attraction to start with. And then you may overlook aspects of their personality that are actually non-negotiables for you. Yes. And that is when you start to put yourself in a situation where long-term there could be big problems, because those little problems don't go away. It's like having like a seed in your shoe, or a little stone in your shoe. Over a period of time, it's fine to start with, but over time it is bad, and then you could end up with bruising and a blister or whatever. So you need to go into these situations thinking, and again, I'm trying to relate this to self-love. It comes from that place of knowing yourself well enough. You need to know yourself well enough. Yeah. And that when you go into these relationships, you have to look at it from a friendship perspective, build that foundation, and the chemistry should develop alongside that all the way through. Yeah, absolutely. Then you're going to have a solid foundation. Yeah, I love that. I think it's a really brilliant share. And, I can definitely relate to the perspective of, I suppose, wanting to be liked and wanting to be appreciated in a relationship over actually what I needed. Like it was more important how they felt about me than essentially how I was actually feeling in the relationship. So therefore I didn't have the awareness to kind of look for actually what is making me happy, because it was all about,
like, and I think that's, it's relatable, because if you have the awareness to be able to actually look back and come from an internal perspective, as opposed to like externally, what are they giving me? What beliefs are they, allowing me to have about myself, or about life, or about relationships, of how well I'm doing in this world, as opposed to, what do I believe about myself anyway, that I'm innately worthy. There's kind of a disconnect there when you're looking for it externally to satisfy a need, a belief, a thought that you have about yourself. And if you don't have that person or that thing, you are not good enough, worthy enough.
Sounds almost like it translates from that mask you put on to go to school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
absolutely.
It's that same pattern of
absolutely.
I need them to accept me.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be what they need me to be.
Yeah, for sure. I think, essentially for me, it was like learning how good external validation felt early on in my life from, being at school and having, parents that were my biggest cheerleaders, and, doing reasonably well. And I probably didn't have as much of that, like afraid to get certificates, especially when I was young, like 6 and 7, and, doing okay at sports or whatever you do, and like really receiving that praise. And then it became this like necessity to kind of continue to get that praise in every facet of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can see how that external validation is addictive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you've heavily invested in it, and it's a lot easier to get it from that source rather than look at yourself a lot of the time.
Well, it is, but I also, I challenge that now, because I feel like the internal validation that I'm able to give myself, like what I can really sit with and celebrate and be so fucking proud of within myself, it's over and above anything that I can get from someone else, because it's so pure and authentic based on what I know is right for me, not based on me pretending to be this version of myself that absolutely. It's like giving yourself a back scratch, isn't it? You can give it any time you want. It's like the best one you've had. Exactly. 100%. So it's always interesting, and like I'm a big believer in like learning lessons along the way, and you wouldn't sort of shift things and change things, but to have a level of self-love, or at least self-acceptance and awareness, like how would that have shifted some of those core relationships in my life, especially moving through those more significant relationships. And for me, we talked about forgiveness early on, which I think is a big piece of the puzzle, like really forgiving ourselves for the way that not only we may have treated other people, but the way we allowed ourselves to be treated. And that's been a real big journey for me, post relationships that have had a significant impact on my life. It's so easy to be like, fuck them, they did this, they did that, they made me feel like this, like, et cetera. But until you actually realize the part you played, whether or not you're, I don't know when you're young and you're cheated on, but like, I think, even down the track, if you've been with someone for a long time and infidelity or whatever happens, there's a breakdown before that. It's not like we're just streaming along, living our best lives, like really connected, feeling really fulfilled with each other, and then you just...
No.
Like, that's not the way it works.
There's a disconnection somewhere along the line, and I think it's hard because, both sexes are equally as capable of manipulating the other to believe that nothing is going on. There's some people out there who are very good at gaslighting their partners to not suspect a thing. But I guess you have to look at their motivations for doing it and what were the signs that was. And I guess as we get older, we get better at picking those up, especially if it's happened to us before. Personally, I didn't know what it felt like to be cheated on until I did. And I had already cheated on someone before that, and I couldn't empathise. I could kind of empathise with her based on how it had felt. Obviously, I knew that doing it was bad. But at the same time, I had normalized it because it was part of my survival strategy to ensure that someone else was there just in case I was left. And I was like, I knew that it was painful to experience. I knew that it would be painful to experience because even small things that weren't cheating, I found painful, And it was because to me they represented the start of the loss. So if she was even talking to another guy, or there was another guy interested in her and she was entertaining it or whatever, I was just like, oh, I can't let that happen. And it wasn't until I actually was heavily cheated on, and I felt that I was like, this is so damaging. This is so damaging. And when I multiple times tried to come back from it, tried to trust her again, waking up in the middle of the night, thinking about it, wanting to wake her up, talk about it,
feeling,
all those things like, but can you tell me some more details about like what happened and things that I knew were going to hurt me and that were going to keep me in this cycle and probably giving me some form of dopamine hit, getting this reinforcement that, hurts again and it hurts again, and like, tell me more. I don't want to know. And then I'm angry and it was so destructive, but then also the damage that did to future relationships too, because it put me in even more of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out state. I had to do that to realize how damaging it was. And
it's tricky because it's like hindsight, and you've got that self-awareness now, like how would things have been differently in the way that you would have given yourself the space to heal and grow within the relationship so that you went into a new one feeling like you had forgiven yourself or forgiven the situation or taken responsibility for your part in it. A big part of self-love is being able to, as we said, take the responsibility for the part you play in any breakdown.
That ownership comes with just the most big, that release that we're talking about of just, my God, I'm so much better. It's hard, isn't it? Because I look at my roadmap through relationships and what I had to learn, and some people would probably look at that and go, but that's common sense. So for some people it might be, and that they go, we just don't cheat because that's really hard on the other person. I'm not going to do it. But then I'm also like, I'd argue that you don't know what it feels like. So I'm like, absolutely. You don't know what it feels like to want to do it or why, and you also don't know what it feels like to have it done to you.
Absolutely.
Yet. And then maybe when one of those things happens in the future, because we're all not future proof, that you may get into a relationship where you're like, I'm fine, I know right and from wrong. Nothing's going to happen like that. And then you get into one where you're really unfulfilled. You don't know how to leave the person. You might have kids. You might have a house together. You might have pets. And then you're like, that guy at work is really cute. And then what I mean? Like, and suddenly you start being really hard on yourself and you're like, oh my God, I wish I'd learned this when I was younger. What do I do? And it's like, well, I've been there. You just don't do it. But I had to do it to know what it felt like. And then I also had to bring it into another relationship to then know the damage it's doing, because I'm just wired to look for it and wired to, I'm basically suspecting my new partner of doing it before she's even done it.
Yeah, and that's the hard piece, isn't it?
That's the baggage from the trauma that you haven't dealt with. And I needed to even know what the baggage was to deal with it. So I could have addressed it at the time and I could have gone, right, I need to be single, but what does it even look like addressing it when you're single, but you don't know how to address it and you don't even know what it is yet?
Yeah.
You're like, I've got baggage. I think it's about cheating. I've been cheated on. How do I deal with that? Anyone?
It wasn't a thing. For sure.
What do I do? I go to a counsellor. You go to the wrong counsellor. You don't deal with it in the right way.
Yeah.
You go into another relationship. You're like, I think I've dealt with it, but really, you need to. I don't know. This could be a controversial opinion, but I feel like some relationships are just sacrificial, in that whoever it is going to get hurt. They just are, because they're next in line, and like the reason I say that is because if you've come from trauma, the next relationship, it's so important that you pick someone who understands that trauma. Because if you go into a relationship, and I don't mean understands as in they've been through it, but they just understand that you're going through it. The reason I say that is because you have the potential to overreact or underreact or do all sorts of things in that situation, which could cause real waves. Effectively, you're going to cause real waves in the relationship regardless. You are, because you're finding your feet again. And if the relationship is stable, if it's capable of being stable, and you're bringing this trauma into it, the flow-on effects of whatever you've been through, you really do need someone in there who's going to exercise a degree of understanding, make the effort to communicate with you about it, and offer at the very least to support you through a healthy amount of it. They don't have to be your counsellor.
No, of course.
And they shouldn't. But they should at least have enough awareness to go, right, I'm going to extend myself a little bit more in this relationship than would be needed normally, because I care about this person, and I'm going to make sure that they know they have that space to effectively overreact every now and then or in these situations, but I'm still going to set boundaries around what I will and won't allow.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure that is a healthy boundary, and I'm going to explain to them where that is. It's a lot to expect of someone. I get it. Not many people are that, there's not everyone's going to be that self-aware.
Of course not. Yeah, for sure.
But otherwise, I think there's a really high chance of whoever that is that's next in line of getting hurt. especially if they have no degree of self-awareness, is
Yes.
the person who has been hurt is going to bring some real big waves
Well, this is
into that relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hurt people, and if you don't have the emotional intelligence as the person that is hurting, or the person that has then decided to enter the relationship with someone that's hurting, it's a responsibility piece. Once again, it comes back down to, and I'm all for setting boundaries around like what you will and won't tolerate from that person that is hurting, and I think that's probably where things get a little bit like, if you're hurting, you're potentially behaving from that place of trauma. And you don't necessarily, the other person might not necessarily know that's why they're getting, just a repeat. It's the cycle. And then we put our hurt onto others, and that's essentially where we're all operating from if we don't have this awareness. We've cultivated these beliefs as young humans, mostly children, where we've taken on, we don't have the difference between logic and illogical. So we take on, my dad coming home from work and, like pushing me out of the way to go and take his tie off. Like, I think that's rejection. So therefore I'm trying time and time again to get his attention, to get other males' attention, to get everyone in life's attention. He didn't do anything wrong. He just had a hard day at work. It's not like a physical push away. Let me be very clear. Just a really...
It's an emotional push away.
Absolutely.
Like, I will talk to you when I'm ready.
I've taken that on. I've created a belief around what I need to do to be loved.
Right. Yep.
I need to earn love. What can I do to earn love? And we all have those beliefs that if we don't understand where they've come from, and I mean that would have then led me to have, whatever happened.
Yeah, there's some secondary beliefs that develop from that one, and the effects of either having those needs met or not.
Totally.
And you're like, because you might go and apply that to your relationships with men, and it will get you a certain amount of results.
Of course.
And those results might be beneficial or not.
To a certain extent,
that it could be, and you go, and then it's either reinforced or it's not.
Absolutely.
And those pathways all have stemmed from that one belief that has developed from your fear of rejection, effectively. That
I need to earn love. I'm not just worthy of it, and that's why.
So you've got to trace it back. There's got to be some like detective work done to go, what other beliefs have I developed based on this?
Yeah, and I mean that's one of our big roles is to hold space for people to do that, because it becomes a lot simpler when you can go back to that younger version of yourself and give them what they need.
Yes.
What did you need in that moment as that young child that wanted to see her dad and tell him about her day? Like, okay, cool. Well, how can you ask for that and either give it to yourself or consciously ask from a friend, from your partner? And I mean, even some of those, early relationship beliefs that you talk to, I do wonder if you break it down to a deeper level where there would have been some experiences young, where you're moving through the subconscious versus conscious, and you don't have the logical mind.
I know. When I go back and think about these things, that's as far back as I think.
Okay, yeah.
And then I'm like, there's got to be stuff further back than that. Beautiful. So like, that's, I remember, do you remember the movie Fly Away Home? With Anna Paquin, and she had the geese. The geese, and they flew. Yeah. So when I saw that, I was just in love with her. I wrote her a letter. I never got a letter back, but I remember writing one, and I would have been like 11, maybe, or 12.
Yeah. So what did that mean? Yeah.
I don't know, but that's the earliest memory I have of
like
anything.
Love
But I also remember. Do you know I remember my very early memories of being aware of Valentine's Day, even as a kid at primary school, in my later years of primary school, I really wanted to just, I had already started thinking about ways to, like, what's the word when you, it's not woo or like.
Yeah, but I suppose it is. Like impress.
Ways to impress women and honor or girls.
Yeah.
Ways to impress little girls. It's like, no, like I had already thought about like Valentine's Day. Okay, I'll go pick some flowers down at the river and I'll leave them on her doorstep.
Yeah.
In the morning with a card, like, and I was already thinking about what it would be like early morning and whatever that month, in February, and I'd be like, okay, so I'll go before her parents get up and everything, and I'll put it on the doorstep, and I'll go, and then I'll somehow let her know, so that when your parents open the door, there's going to be these flowers on the doorstep with a little card. That was my earliest memory that I have of thinking about that way. I never acted on it, but I'm also like, it's to me very pure, and that when I was thinking about it, I had never been hurt.
Yeah.
I hadn't been hurt as far as I knew. I mean, we used to play games like catch and kiss, you know, as a kid. And as a little boy, for me anyway, because I was raised around women and things, it wasn't like a thing to me. I was just hoping that it would be the girls chasing the boys at one point, and I just let it happen. You know, you know what I mean? Like, I was just thinking to myself, like, I'm not going to try and stop them if they want to do it. I'll just let it happen.
So beautiful. Yeah.
But, you know, as a kid, that was so innocent, and then I'm almost feeling this little sense of rejection, like, why are they not
chasing? Yeah.
Why are the girls not chasing us?
Absolutely.
Like, you know?
And it's just powerful to have those conversations and just have that awareness, because once again it's that knowledge is power thing.
Yes.
And then you've got like you can feel more empowered because you've got all this knowledge of,
I know.
you know, that 7-8-year-old version of yourself. Like, what was he feeling? What were his beliefs around those things? Guarantee most of us are operating from that 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old self.
Yep. Yeah, it was they're all very pure thoughts when I think back to it. It wasn't, and for me it wasn't coming from, it was just coming from a place of wanting that connection, I guess.
Totally.
And I didn't know what the connection represented at that age.
No.
I just knew that I wanted to feel something.
Yeah.
It was probably a very primal thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't physical though. It was like, I just wanted the confirmation that it was possible, I guess, at that age. That someone was going to be interested in me.
Look, and you know, innately as humans, we all want to be seen, heard, and acknowledged.
Yes. Yeah.
Whether that is intimacy in whichever shape or form it is, or, you know, whether it's just an acknowledgement of who we are, that we, you know, that plays into our self-worth, and just like, hey, you're you and that's okay.
Yep.
Like, you're enough. And that's a powerful piece. And if we all want that, like that's, it comes down to that for so many of us.
Yeah.
And that's a continual work on, I feel like, in my work, and you probably find the same thing, like being seen, heard and acknowledged, being listened to, being accepted as your full self, and then being loved for exactly who you are.
Yes.
Like, dream.
That is the dream, isn't it? And you're not going to get there unless you work out who you are. Yeah. You have to start doing that work at some point.
Yeah.
So there was something I was going to say before when we were talking about that relationship stuff. So if we were going to think about interrupting that dynamic of that hurt people, and you were thinking, okay, I'm going to if you were to arm someone with 3 skills. So effectively, if someone came to them and that person was hurt, or that person had gone through some trauma, 3 skills so that person could protect themselves from that person.
Okay.
It's like, for me, an example of one would be knowing how and when to set healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's a very basic one, obviously. If we say that's one, but what would I know?
We'll get it wrong. It's like boundaries, and seems simple, but it
seems really simple. You like a boundary. Okay, I'm going to tell them I don't like that. It's like actually, but there's so much more to it. If we say that's one, what would be 3 more that you would recommend? That basically, if someone came to you, a client, and they were like, I just want to make sure that I am not going to be a victim to someone else's bad habits based on their trauma. Yeah. But I want to know that I can effectively support them through a healthy amount of it. What are some things you would teach them?
For sure.
Reinforce?
I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is like a safety piece in terms of honesty. So I think, you know, the ability to be open and honest with each other, and especially for that person that is, you know, holding this other person wherever they've come from with compassion, but still being able to really express themselves honestly. You know, this is how I'm feeling because X, Y, and Z, and invite that same honesty from that other person. I think, you know, like not like white lies, not necessarily manipulation, like not that heavier terms, but I think when we're hurt, when we're trying to enter a new relationship, we are trying to do whatever we can to kind of like keep everything good and easy to start with, essentially. So I think honesty, like building that place of safety, and that can be really tricky because, I mean, I feel like in my earlier relationships, like vulnerability was a real big piece of the puzzle for me. Like I didn't want them to see that I felt this way. And so I think you've got to break down those walls, and you've got to be vulnerable and honest straight away. If you have any hope of success in a relationship, like we know vulnerability builds connection, yet we're so afraid to show that vulnerable side. Yeah, and then that vulnerability is going to be contextual, isn't it, with each person? So it's really going to be what's okay being vulnerable to one person may not be to the other, and I guess too, I always say, like when dating is a game.
but it should be either a healthy game. It should be a bit of a healthy dance. I always refer to it as like a healthy dance. It
gets to be fun, yeah.
Rather than a manipulative game.
Oh my gosh.
Because it can go either way. And the reason I say that is because, like, if, for example, if we were just to say, okay, on the first day, in the first 10 minutes, I want you to tell them all your deepest, darkest secrets. It would be like, that's not going to be productive.
Absolutely.
But that's not to say that somewhere down the track, years down the track, you couldn't tell them those things.
Of course.
So it's always going to come down to vulnerability is what to me, and then what is it to them.
Absolutely.
Understanding where that middle ground is and going, okay, I need to make sure that I'm not going to make myself look crazy here, but I'm still going to tell them what's important to me or what I'm taking ownership for, or these kind of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it is that sliding scale.
Well, that's it, yeah. And I suppose I was coming from a perspective of like, you know, you guys have established that this is like a committed relationship, not as much from a perspective of like, you know, we're kind of like dating, because that, you know, like I think there's a boundary in itself around laying out what does this mean, you know, and I think those wishy-washy, like that's hard to deal with, and I feel like that's, you know, like that whole like we're together, or like what does that mean, or I just refer back to Love Island because I feel like it's on at the moment and it's like exclusive, or we're like locked down, like using all of these terms, like what do they all mean? So I suppose coming at that question, you know, talking to building safety and honesty and being vulnerable is essential for a committed relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe not on your like first or second date to kind of like take them to a breathwork journey and release all your past trauma.
No,
but also whatever you're into.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I feel like if that's what you want in a partner, then that's cool too.
You might find that's actually quite productive with the right person.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely, for sure, definitely.
I think like for me that honesty that you're talking about and the vulnerability is works hand in hand with that communication that you would encourage. The most healthy form of communication. That I want you to tell me if something's bothering you once you've thought about what it is, and you know, or like if you've had to think about what it is and it's bothering you, just tell me. Because again, that honesty and things can't happen unless the person is open to it, and at least, well, to a degree, prompting it. I don't know. There's obviously going to be a balance in everything that you do, but making sure that you encourage, but also don't enable.
100%. It actually comes back to that like opening piece that you talked to, which was this, you know, the opportunity, the ability, the safety to feel your emotions, but the responsibility and accountability to not behave in a way that is going to impact on others negatively and yourself negatively.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's a big piece of that within that, I think.
Yeah, I think everyone needs to, and again, I've had a lot of people when I've talked about this kind of stuff say to me, this stuff should be taught in schools. And I guess to a degree it is, some of it, but not enough. Yeah, like,
it's tricky. I mean, some schools are probably better than others. And, you know, some parents that have more self-awareness are then having these gorgeous conversations with their children. Like, I mean, you don't know what you don't know. No. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So, you know, like I love the fact that it's having this flow-on effect where you've brought this consciousness, this awareness into your parenting, so that if your son has a belief about himself that is not going to be supportive of him going forward, we can actually look at unpacking that and giving him a belief that actually is going to support his greatest good. And nothing is going to be perfect. We're not ever going to be these enlightened humans. We're moving towards that, but it's really tricky to, it's a journey. Yeah,
absolutely. I think one of the big things that I could probably take away from some of my experiences is that courses that were taught in schools, courses that were taught in prison.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Some of the things that were taught in prison, I don't remember learning at school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is that?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like things like, I don't even know if self-love and emotional regulation is in the curriculum.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Is it? Like, because that's quite important. And
it's massively important.
I think schools effectively leave that to the parents.
Which, I mean, they can't do everything. To a degree. Yeah.
But at the same time, and I'm just assuming it's not in the curriculum. It might be by now. I don't know. I don't remember it being when I was young. No. But if you're thinking about, say, emotional regulation, self-love, what are some other ones? Just good communication skills. Yeah, you're taking responsibility, these kind of things. If they were taught heavily at school level and it was practiced, whether that's at primary school and then reinforced again at high school in health and education or whatever, you would wonder what if there would be a measurable effect on the quality of the relationships that people had, and then whether that would influence things like criminal behaviour. Because a lot of the guys that are on these courses in prison, most of the courses are around emotional regulation, because most of the people in prison are in there for violence and issues around emotional regulation.
Yep, absolutely.
It could be fueling a theft mindset. It could be fueling domestic violence. It could be fueling addiction.
Yep.
It could be fueling anything, but a lot of it comes from that low self-worth.
Yeah.
A lot of it comes from not knowing how to have healthy relationships with people, not knowing how to set boundaries, not knowing how to respect boundaries, not knowing how to take ownership, not knowing how to be vulnerable. And all these things are taught in those courses. And there's different levels of course. So you can do a 6-week course, you can do the SRP course, or a short rehabilitative program. You can do the medium intensity rehabilitative program, the MERP course, or you can do the serious. And, it goes 6 weeks, 6 months, a year. You could be on that course for a year or whatever. They're the really
legit.
serious.
Like, I want to do it. Like, it's so, all of that, like, you know what I mean?
I know.
That's amazing.
Well, when I was in prison, I was in there for drugs offending. So manufacturing steroids. And I did a short course. And I remember thinking to myself, this isn't relevant to me. It's like, I know how to manage my emotions. Like I do. This isn't why I'm here. But I looked around the room and I was like, you guys don't. And as in saying that, I still didn't know how to manage my emotions.
There's always things to learn.
Completely. There was always things to learn. But I found myself not taking on like a side role to everyone else who was there. And it was funny because I ended up translating a lot of what the facilitator was saying to the boys.
Yes,
Because this is like a middle-aged woman talking to these men.
Yeah.
And these men are just like, they don't want to be there. They like the coffee and the biscuits, but that's about it.
Yes, absolutely.
And they're saying things and the boys like, guys, this is a guy who's like, his mum was a meth addict, didn't pick him up from school.
Yeah, totally.
So he had to walk home for 3Ks on his own at 5 years old or 6 years old. So he's looking at that woman thinking, I don't give a fuck what you say.
Yeah.
And I'm going, bro, have you thought about this? And he's like, oh, yeah, it's probably you. Yeah, I think you're right. And just to have that little moment there, I'm like, fuck, he should have been taught that at 5 years old.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
it would have been. And he wasn't. It's unfortunate. You can't do anything about that.
And hard to teach at 5 years old, like the depths of that awareness. But, I think those like checkpoints within that space, because, a lot of parents haven't regulated their emotions or are just coming from a place of their own trauma. And so it's like, you can't, like, you're only doing the best you can with what you've got.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh.
It's a big one. It's a big one. It's a massive one.
Yeah, massive. I know. So what moving forward with your life now, what are you focusing on in a positive sense in this area for yourself? Like, so what would be, if we look at self-improvement, what's your next step or your next journey in self-improvement?
I love that. It's a beautiful question.
Or personal development. Sorry, not self-improvement. I mean, it's a similar thing.
Yeah, same. Thing. Yeah. I think trust is always a big one for me, self-trust. Not talking about trust in relationships. I think being able to trust myself, being able to trust the path that I'm on, being able to trust the opportunities, being able to trust the failures that come up and the lessons that come along with those. That's been a really massive journey in the last couple of years, and I think it will be ongoing. It's always something that I can come back to and support myself through. And I think there's it's heavily tied in like self-worth and knowing yourself and feeling safe to be your authentic self, your full expression of yourself. So trust is always a big one. I feel like I kind of alluded to before, that kind of anger release, like that's something that I've sort of been moving through for the last kind of wee while, because it kept kind of cropping up in different spaces that I was engaging to kind of move through, on my journey. So just continuing to be able to support myself through like anger.
Yes. That'll be your number one in terms of the emotions that you feel you need to regulate?
Yes, I think so. Well, because I'm not regulate so much as like offer myself a safe space for them to be felt, because I'm a real big believer in that mind-body connection. I know you feel that way inclined as well. And so
isn't it funny, because it's not emotional regulation is a is not fair.
Yeah.
It's not that shouldn't exist. It's behavior regulation.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? You should not have to regulate your emotion. You regulate your behavior. Emotional regulation, I guess, is the gap between the emotion and the behavior.
Yes, yeah.
So we shouldn't.
Yeah, expressing your emotions.
That's a definition I'm going to challenge for the rest of my career.
Yeah, I love that.
Honestly, I will, because like you can't be expected to regulate your emotions. You should be expected to regulate your behavior, but feel your emotions, like you say.
Yes, I agree. Like they can't be regulated. I suppose regulation in a way that like feel them safely, feel them honestly, feel them, like with people that can hold you. But yeah, absolutely. And I just believe that anything you hold on to will create disease in the body, mind, soul, essentially. So I think for me, like it's important to release that anger because I just don't think that it's serving me probably from more of a physical standpoint. And, I've had those kinds of like instances, like bringing in the woo-woo, but I wear hearing aids. I lost my hearing, and a lot of that for me was suppressed grief that I hadn't let myself feel from some real heavy losses in my life.
Right.
And that kind of came back to sort of bite me in the ear, so to speak.
How did that manifest? Isn't it you just progressively lost it? Or
and there was like lots of grieving that needed to be done. And I feel like when I lost my hearing, I am very social, connected person, especially in my corporate career. That was kind of my role, was to sort of hold like the office and know what was going on and kind of piece everything together, like an internal marketing piece. And so when I lost my hearing, I just couldn't operate in that space. It really made me question all of my social connections. I really dealt with sort of feelings of anxiety, because those spaces that I've always felt safe and like fine in, like I really had to reevaluate everything. So I mean, it's a big, beautiful combustion of everything that I wasn't listening to. That was like my gut feelings of my direction for life and what was and wasn't serving me. But innately it gave me the opportunity to kind of grieve a past version of myself that I thought needed to meet these expectations in society, parents' expectations, and really forge a path from like my own authentic purpose.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. That's heavy. I have my own contribution in a different way, but almost a similar line. I lost my hearing in my left ear, most of it, when I was in the army, and a little bit in my right. And it was because we had been going through, we're on core training, we're in the bush, and we go through live fire drills. And so we're in close country. It's very, very dense bush on the west coast. And you effectively walk uphill through bush, and then and you're patrolling in a section of about 10 or 12 people until you see a target. And then the first person who sees it yells out and gets down and starts shooting at it. And then we all go into our positions, and then with that, and our peers, so there's two of us, we bound up. So one person runs ahead, they jump down on the ground, they start shooting, and then as soon as they start shooting, you run past them, and you get to a safe place, you sit down and you get on your stomach, you start shooting, and then they bound past you. So that's called assaulting. You assault on the target. Now, I was using a heavy machine gun at the time, and it was belt fed, so the rounds are all basically linked to each other. And it was so notoriously bad, this gun, for getting stoppages. So every time you fire it, it was a machine gun. It was meant to fire 3 to 5 rounds each time. You'd hold the trigger down. It would just fire one, and then it would jam. And it was there's a big drill you have to go through every time you do it. So you have to open the top, sweep it, close it, pull it, go cock it, fire it, open it, put rounds back on, close it, cock it, and then fire it, and you can go again. So that's a big process each time. It takes you about 5-6 seconds if you're fast. So I had to do that, and then I'd fire around, it would jam, I'd have to do it all again. And so I was falling behind, and they were like, Townsend, you go through again. So it was each assault took like 10 minutes, and it was exhausting. We'd done so many that day, and they were like, Townsend, you go through again, just get a normal style, which is a rifle. Big rush, end of the day, sun was almost down. We'd been burying rounds because we were just like, we wanted to go home. So burying ammunition. And so everyone was doing it. So then anyway, I got another rifle, I went through, and we're walking into the bush, and next minute, contact front, they start firing, and I realised as soon as that first shot was fired, I didn't have earplugs in. Now, what I was supposed to do was I was supposed to put my hand up and say stop, like really loud, so that everyone stopped, because we're using live rounds. So it's not blank rounds or anything like that. These are live rounds. there's directing staff behind us. They're making sure everyone is going in the right direction. Your rifle always has to be pointing forwards because you could easily shoot your friend. And as you're doing these bounds, that he's running right ahead. I'm shooting, the bullet's going 2 or 3 meters past his head towards this target.
Yeah.
It's a very high intensity situation.
Really
Trees are getting cut down from rounds going through them and things.
Yeah.
So I didn't say stop.
Right.
And my rifle, the end of the rifle's here, my ear, that ear, and my partner was just on my left, his rifle too, and then all these other rifles going in close bush. It was just echoing everywhere. My left ear rung so many different tones.
Yeah.
With each shot, I could feel it. It was so painful each time.
Oh my gosh.
And then eventually it was just, I couldn't hear anything coming out of it.
Yeah.
And after the 10 minutes was up, I was really dazed. We did a debrief and things. No one there even knew what I had just gone through.
Wow. And
we went back to our harbour and everything, and we camped up for the night. And I remember my friends talking to me, and I was listening to them. It was like a bomb had gone off. I was just like, looking at them, I couldn't really even work out what they were saying, and ended up yelling at one of them because I was like, I can't fucking hear you. I was so angry. I'd put myself through that. When I slept at night, I lay on that side and I couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
So now my hearing is damaged permanently from that.
Yeah.
And the lesson I took away from that was I need to be more assertive.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
It's something I have regretted every day since, and because I love music, I want to be able to enjoy life, and sound is such an important part of life, and I'm pushing out using a hearing aid because I'm like, I don't want to do it until I really, really need it. I can still
100%
hear, but
totally.
I'm just like I was so angry at myself for so long that I didn't just say no. I thought I'd get hiding or something. I didn't know, and in reality I probably wouldn't have.
No.
But I was just worried.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and that's
put myself
that's
through
the
hell
mentality.
just because I was worried.
And I mean, I have gone on my own sort of journey with acceptance around it, and it's a really beautiful, it's a really beautiful lesson and guide for me. Like I know when I'm not looking after myself properly because my hearing deteriorates,
right.
and it's like I feel like it's a pure emotional, mental, just like holistically indicator of my health and well-being. So it's actually a really beautiful gift at this point. It's still, it's a pain in the ass having to wear hearing aids and things like that, but like the reality is like actually it gets to be an opportunity, and it gets to be
it's almost
really
a sixth sense
to
keep yourself. It's like you've just installed this little like device effectively that shows you when you're not looking after yourself. Yeah,
absolutely. And we all have them.
Because it manifests differently for different people.
Physically. Yeah, absolutely. Whether that's, I don't know, IBS or a dodgy ankle or, like eyes.
I get migraines. Yeah. And normally that's when I'm stressed. I start biting my tongue more.
Yep.
That's a big one for me. Totally. And I've started doing that ever since I got braces and my teeth moved.
Yeah.
It's like my brain doesn't remember where my tongue is or where my teeth are, and so when I start getting stressed and I am trying to eat and talk to someone at the same time or something, I'm like, I'm always biting my tongue, and I'm like, but I know when I'm doing it regularly, I'm like, what's going on? Something's actually happening behind the scenes here.
Yeah, feeling dysregulated, feeling ungrounded. I need to support myself.
Yes, and this is all self-love, isn't it? Just that ultimately that awareness of you and what it is that you need, looking for those moments where you can get a better gauge of who you are, what you need, and it just comes with time, and it comes from talking to the right people, listening to yourself,
100%,
getting that perspective.
Yeah, for sure. It all comes back to us and the success of our, our relationships, across the board, whether that's children, parents, friends, or significant other, is heavily impacted by the way we feel in life and the way that we feel about ourselves. So it's a really beautiful thing to kind of keep tabs on, to dive into, to just, to check on. And so maybe it is just asking yourself a couple of questions of like, how do I feel about myself? Is there something in my life that I'm ready to accept? What parts of myself don't I want anyone to see? How can I love on them more? And then, doing those beliefs exercises around kind of thinking about the core beliefs that you have about who you are, and why you're essentially loved, and then being able to go back through that, sort of exercise, I suppose, that we kind of talked through around like, well, what kind of beliefs did I develop around relationships or around my worthiness to be loved, and then taking it back a step further to that inner child, and really being able to give them what they have needed, and really taking into account the fact that being seen, heard, and acknowledged is your as such, it's your God-given right.
Yes.
And that starts with seeing, hearing, and acknowledging yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that you look at that, like you say, with the inner child, when looking at what they needed, but also then reviewing that core belief system as going, how many of those needs there's obviously healthy needs, and there's each individual needs and everything, but you're like, how much of those were right for me at the time? Did it's a lot of them we experience, and then there's times where we would go, oh, okay, maybe I didn't need that. There's been plenty of times where I've thought I needed something for a long time, and then finally got it and gone, okay, that's not what I thought it was for that long. It's not necessarily as important to me as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And then they've shifted, and there's always going to be those shifts.
I mean, you probably do a little bit of the conversation around your ego and your true self, or your, your heart, your intuition, whatever you want to call. I think that's a really important thing to review as well. Our ego is constantly wanting to keep us in a place of safety, familiarity, routine, regularity. And often when we are learning to love ourselves, it feels really uncomfortable. The same way that it does when you're risking everything and deciding to fall in love with someone. It is the risk reward payoff is massive.
Starting
it's the
a business
biggest
or
risk.
Changing careers or anything.
But love is the biggest one. Deciding to let yourself be fully seen by someone else.
Yep.
And it works both ways with loving yourself. There is a huge discomfort that comes from deciding that you're going to create a level of self-awareness for yourself and love on yourself the way you deserve to, because it's not what we're taught. And we move through life a lot of the time feeling like it's easier to pick out our flaws and to not feel that way inclined about ourselves. So I think there's really something to be said for the discomfort that comes up when you are building self-awareness and knowing that if you're feeling resistance and discomfort, that you're essentially on the right track. Yeah,
absolutely. Like you say, that it is a big deal. Love is a huge deal, and a lot of people don't treat it like it is.
Yeah.
They'll even in their relationships with others, they will pick people based on that, those fears and comfort zones and things, the external validation, the need to be seen. They'll pick someone and they won't even consider what it is they really need and who they really are and everything else, because that's the harder work to do.
Exactly.
But the harder work to do, like you say, is the indication that there's something big there.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing you should do.
Totally.
I remember for years people saying to me that once you're happy on your own, it is the best thing, and you're genuinely happy on your own, and that's not coming from a place of I don't ever want to get into another relationship again.
Course.
It's a case of I want to be in a healthy relationship at the right time with the right person when I'm ready, but at the moment I'm very content just as I am on my own. I mean, we know if you can describe that situation for yourself, I believe you've reached a place of self-love.
Absolutely.
You'd have to.
I agree.
And I remember people saying to me, once you are happy on your own, trust me, it's the best thing. And I just didn't even want to fucking hear it.
Of course not.
Because it was the same as being 21 and thinking, I don't want to ever think differently to how I do now.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I don't want to be like that. At 40, that's so boring. I don't want to not care about the things I care about now. I remember thinking that. I remember thinking I don't want to not care about these things. And these things were so unhealthy.
I know.
And it's when I'm now looking back, I'm I could never go back to being like that. I would hate it. Honestly, but I wouldn't know any different.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. That's that's the thing. But it's exciting to want to build a life with someone that is going to continue to support you to elevate in your existence and expansion as a human being, and vice versa.
Yeah.
To be given the gift and the opportunity to support someone to, continuing to be an evolved version of themselves, and is fucking cool.
It's why it's so important that you both have the same understanding of what relationships are, or what they should be. Yeah. That they are this thing that both people put into, and that they should effectively without a doubt, improve the lives of both people.
Absolutely.
If you are sacrificing too much, or you're being disadvantaged, or you're feeling unhappy, you've really got to review if there are fundamental things that are wrong with that relationship, and if there are, you need to review whether the relationship's right for you, because that's not how they should be.
Yeah.
They need to be overwhelmingly positive. And I say that because, or at least structurally positive.
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
not always going to be positive.
Of course
we know
not.
that.
Of course not.
But the negative things should not be the inability to communicate or a misunderstanding of each other on a huge fundamental level, or for either trying to get the person to adapt to you or adapting too heavily to them.
Yeah.
Needs
100%.
to be balanced.
Absolutely. And I think if you are feeling like you are having consistent issues within your relationship or ongoing with different relationships, there is a beautiful opportunity for you to really grow your awareness and for you to start giving yourself the same love, kindness, support, etc. that you want in a relationship. It's the work that I've done with, especially women that are in that space between relationships and actually, treating themselves the way that they want to be treated by someone. It sounds like ridiculous, but it goes a long way in calling in the right person, because you set a standard for yourself that is absolutely what you are worthy of, and only you can dictate that. Don't wait for someone else to tell you what that standard is. You dictate that standard, and then you
just test and adjust from there. You
create
see
space,
how people receive it. It's the only way to do it. If there was people listening now that were like, she doesn't understand, I have this thing, and honestly, if she knew what it was, she would know I am not worthy of loving myself. I'm not, what advice would you give that person? Like, what would be a good starting point?
Yeah.
If someone was like, I am genuinely not worthy, and if she knew, if I went to her and I told her, she would be like, oh, right, yeah, no, you can't come back from that, which is obviously not the way the world works. What would you give that? What advice? Where's that starting point?
I think creating a safe space to be able to reflect back to people the relationship that they are able to build with themselves. So often we don't share those deep, dark things, and we're not seen, heard, and accepted, acknowledged in them.
Yeah.
I want to create a space where you can be seen, heard, and acknowledged in all facets. And it is scary and it is uncomfortable to share those things. But I guarantee you are worthy of love. You've been worthy of love your entire life, no matter what you have done. You are worthy of love. Or been
through or anything,
Absolutely. No matter the hurt that you've imposed on others, the hurt that you've felt within yourself, everyone is worthy of especially loving themselves. So that's where it starts. And put in place the right guidance and support so that you have people in your life that make you feel, worthy of that love as you build it for yourself.
It's going to start with the right perspective. They have to open themselves up to, at the very least, to get perspective on whatever they're feeling, because if they keep it to themselves, there will be no progress.
Absolutely.
It sucks, isn't it, that sometimes we're not living on a desert island. We don't all have an island to ourselves for the rest of our life.
Of course,
we're going to be interacting with people our whole life, and often it's the people we interact with that gives us the sense of whatever we're feeling, whether that's failure or we don't fit in or we don't feel like we belong or we need this external validation or whatever. So it makes sense that we need to find the right people to test these theories we have about ourselves with.
Absolutely.
If we were, like I said, if we were on the desert island, sure, we can make peace with ourselves and that's all we have to worry about. We can talk to animals or whatever, but in this situation, it's going to be very important that if you're feeling these feelings about yourself and they're negative, that you find the right people to talk to. And those people understand the process, but they also understand they can receive you. They can reflect back some of your unhealthy thinking or some of your problematic thinking, and then help you at the very least to set goals and find a way, navigate through it, so that ultimately you can shift your perspective into a place of acceptance and self-love. Okay, so if people want to get in touch with you and they want to work with you, what's the best way to get?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm mostly on Instagram. I do have a website as well, so it's Bec Connaughton. At Bec Connaughton.
I'll link it in the description for the podcast as well.
Love that. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm really an open book. Like, reach out, let's strike up a conversation. Let me know what's happening for you. I'll always connect with you on some level. We don't have to dive straight in, but I feel like I've got a really beautiful I suppose, lots of content that will support you in the first instance.
Yes.
Which is a great place to start. So
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry. I was going to say, I have never had a conversation on here flow like it has. Like, it's been fantastic.
Oh, amazing. I love that.
Just for anyone who's listening to, we approached this one very ad hoc. So it was just a case of we're both very passionate about this topic.
Absolutely.
I had a list of questions, and I think we asked it one or two, and then it was like, no, we'll throw that away. So it's been really, really good, and I think that some of the most productive conversations happen in that way. All the most productive conversations happen in that way anyway. So
I'm a really big believer in whatever is meant to be talked to will be talked to. But I really want to thank you for the opportunity, and I really want to celebrate your passion and your drive and your motivation. I totally feel like you are in your purpose, and I'm really looking forward to seeing, what progresses from here. Anyone that works with you is in a good space and is doing themselves a great favour. So good for you.
That is a very, very nice observation, and I always appreciate feedback. I've said to a lot of people, I've never felt more of a sense of fulfillment and purpose from what I'm doing now. So I to anyone out there listening, I'm going to reinforce the same message. I would not be on the path I'm on now if I hadn't been through significant failure and some very negative emotions. So if that's a lesson to anyone, if you're going through something hard, keep going.
Yes.
There is going to be a point where you will know why it was worth it.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
No true words spoken. 100%. I love that.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you again. And hope you have a great week and weekend.
Love that. Thank you.
Thanks.